Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Chia Dogu. In what I like to call the Summer Personal Development Series, I have another phenomenal guest on the show today. I'm talking to Johnathan Grzbowski. Johnathan is a co-founder of a hot design startup called Penji, and Johnathan is also a podcaster who runs the Blind Entrepreneur podcast. He's a phenomenal guest. He's come to share his story and his background, and also to tell us about his own podcast, The Blind Entrepreneur, the type of entrepreneurs he talks to, and what the premise of his show is all about. I'm pleased to have Johnathan on the show today to share his wisdom about starting up and running your own business, even though he left the corporate world. And I think there's a lot of value in here for you guys that are still on the fence thinking about launching your own entrepreneurial venture. So this is one where you're going to want to take your notes and scribble some good notes while you're out there on the beach sipping your Mai Tais and whatnot, and just pretty much enjoy yourself and learn something from someone who's blazing the trail in the design space. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to the rest of the show. You can find more episodes on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and wherever you're listening to podcasts. You can also find the episode on my website, which is www.odogwu.com, or even go on Podbean and Google the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast to listen to more exciting episodes of young, daring entrepreneurs like Johnathan. So without further ado, take it away. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Chia Dogu, your host as usual. My guest today is Johnathan Grzbowski. Johnathan was listed under the Owners Magazine's 40 Under 40. He's the co-founder of Penji, which is a software as a service platform that provides design services to marketing teams around the world. In addition to that, he's also the producer and the host of a #1 rated business podcast titled The Blind Entrepreneur. Of course, Johnathan is not blind, but there's a reason he named it that way. And also there's a unique reason behind his company name Penji. So I'm pleased to have Johnathan on the show today to tell us a little bit about himself, his business experience, and of course, what he's doing currently. So with that said, Johnathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to talk to your listeners, and hopefully we talked a little bit off air. Hopefully by the end of this conversation, we could you could give me the rightful name of a Nigerian name that I could be called.
Oh yes, yeah. So we're talking in the background. Jonathan's best friend is also Nigerian, as you all know I am, and Johnathan has participated in the time-honored tradition of being a groomsman in a traditional Nigerian wedding. So he's gone through the entire process from rolling on the ground, paying money to convince the family that the husband is the right guy for the daughter, and eating Nigerian food. So when somebody can go through the whole process, you better believe he's Nigerian, whether he's born in America or wherever. So I'm definitely going to give him a Nigerian name by the end of the show.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Johnathan, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. How did you get started on your entrepreneurial journey?
Absolutely. So I'd say the entrepreneur journey has been the summation of a whole lot of failure and very little success. And when I say very little success, there was more failures than success. The failures were very low, and the successes are very high. I'd say that the bug, so to speak, of when the entrepreneurship journey began was when I was 14 mowing lawns. And my mom came up to me and told me at one point in time that I needed to go out and get a real job. And I thought to myself, well, why do I have to go out and get a real job when I'm literally making money on my own mowing lawns? We had about like 40 to 60 lawns that we were doing on a monthly basis, $20 a piece. So it was pretty good money that we were making at the age of 16. And I hate to say it, but we blew all the money on stupid things like Pokemon cards and junior bacon cheeseburgers at Wendy's. So we did not invest any of it smartly or wisely. Fast forward, I'd say when I went and my mom told me to go out and get a real job, I unfortunately listened to her and fortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, and it led me to a job at Apple. And I worked for Apple for a couple of years, and it taught me a whole lot of amazing things about myself, about how a company works, how it operates, how to communicate effectively. So my first entrepreneurship career journey started and taught me what work ethic looked like. How do I work my butt off? I'm out in the sun, grinding every single day from 6 a.m. to whenever the sun goes down. So that built that foundation there. And the second thing was that the foundation with Apple was what a company looks like. And then the final thing was just the grit and the never say die or never say no attitude that I learned from my experiences in owning an agency for the past 5 years. It inevitably just not being fulfilled and not feeling fulfilled as one would have hoped for. And now what we're doing with Penji, which is the culmination, as stated before, of just every single success and every failure that I've ever had. And I am more elated and more excited to wake up every single day to talk about Penji and to help people out now than I've ever been in my entire life. So just excited and grateful for the opportunity to share my story with you guys today.
Great. So now you mentioned you worked in Apple for a number of years and then you left to start your own business. So you talked a little bit about the lessons you learned, but were there any particular moments or was there any factor that actually caused you to say, hey, you know what, I don't think I'm going to stay in Apple and rise across the corporate ladder and then be a director or manager or whatever the top level is. I actually want to go and build my own thing. So was there any particular moment while you were in Apple that caused you to think and shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I could say that there's a point in time where I was just extremely sad and depressed by going into my job every single day and being asked the same questions and just being just kind of having a career and a life that was very stagnant. It was very linear. There was nothing was happening in it. And to go to a job and you know, I'm not one of those people that like I need to be my own boss. I've never really felt that philosophy. I never had that type of ego like, oh wow, you know, this is my goal. But more so what my goal has been throughout my entire career has been the ability of helping people and wanting to help people. And working in that environment, I wasn't necessarily helping anyone. And I wasn't providing anything more than just a solution to a computer problem or to a solution to a phone problem or whatever it is. And so that kind of like, you know, thinking about it now, it makes a lot of sense why I felt unfulfilled, because I felt that same feeling with my past organization, the agency that we had. We were doing business for 5 years and we were going very well and we were growing. We had a lot of amazing clients, but that feeling came back to me and I remembered what that felt like when I was 23, when I felt 22, 23, when I felt it the first time, and when I felt it again at 27, 28. Now being 29, just a couple of years later, I knew that feeling. I knew where I was headed. I knew I needed to change and adapt. And so it wasn't until I don't know if you've ever done anything in your life or anybody listening right now where you literally wake up every day and you just feel as if that you're collecting money.
Yeah.
And that's like the wrong way to live your life. Anytime you want to be able to work for the paycheck, I mean, that's all well and good and people can get by, but it's not fun. And that's what we kind of were at Waterfront Media. It was just an organization that collected money. And so when we went to an event on October 20th, the press asked myself and my now co-founder, what are you doing for your city? And how are you able to keep the talent that's coming into the city to stay here? And I live in a city called Camden, New Jersey, which is right outside Philadelphia. And if you ever do some research, it was labeled as one of the most dangerous cities in America at one point in time. It's predominantly people who don't necessarily look like me or have the background and education like me. They may not have particularly the resources as me in particular. And there's a lot of opportunity here. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to create an organization that not only provided a great service, but also gave back to our local community. And we're doing that through multiple channels. We're offering students jobs and internships to the inner city youth. The only people that we hire in America, in the United States, is from Camden. And they're from our city. They were either born here, they were raised here, they go to school here, they're residents here. And then we also, so there's that aspect, and we also help our nonprofits that are local to our community as well.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. It's very nice when a company is not just thinking about profit for themselves, being able to earn enough money to buy Rolls Royces or more houses somewhere, but thinking of the economic and social impact of the activity they do to their environment where they are, because there's no point in building a successful business that benefits you while the rest of your community or your society continues to suffer and live in poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the question in that?
No, it's not a question. I'm just stating that it's good when you have a mission to
absolutely.
your business.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because when it comes to when you're doing something like that and you're helping people, it drives you to do more. Because if you're only helping yourself, then is that really what you want your life to be defined as? Is just you being selfish? And listen, there are moments where I'm extremely selfish, and there are moments where we're all extremely selfish as human beings. That happens. But at the end of the day, the things that wake me up and the things that push us forward are the stories that we're able to hear where we're helping people that have hated their jobs their entire life. Yeah. And now they're working for a young startup that is doing some great things. And not to mention, there's $2.2 billion being spent in the city of Camden right now. Wow. And it's a lot of revitalization that's happening. And there's buildings being built. There are roads being paved. But we're not architects. We're not engineers. So we can't help that. And the businesses that are coming here have a unwritten law, so to speak, that they need to hire people from the city of Camden too. And the people and the companies that are coming here, some of them aren't doing it. So if a small startup that doesn't have an ounce of funding, that's cash flow positive, that has worked their butts off, developed processes and procedures themselves, and we're hiring inner city youth, why can't you do the same? Yeah. And that goes to the people listening that aren't in our area, and that goes out to the people that are in your local community. You don't necessarily have to get talent from the biggest and the brightest universities in the world. You can still obtain the same talent. You just have to be able to look out for it. Yeah. Because it's all about recognizing potential and not necessarily what is on the resume. Because a lot of people, if you had looked at their resume on the surface, you wouldn't have employed them or you wouldn't have figured them out to do great things. Like, I think I was reading last week on LinkedIn about Steve Jobs, where he applied for a job and it was the only one resume that happened to still be around. So the person put it up after 20, 30 years or so. And they were like, oh, Steve Jobs made a lot of mistakes on his resume. But in as much as there were mistakes and all that, that they could tell that the guy had a drive and a passion to do something with his life, though he didn't get the job. So looking out for the potential talent around you, I think it's a very strong way of positioning yourself in your community, because it shows you're vested in the growth and in the success of whatever you're doing in that town. And you're also vested in making sure that it becomes a more attractive place to do business. You turn around the negative reputation that Camden has for the better, and which elevates everything else: property values, business values, social value, moral value. Everything just goes up all at once. Yep. So I love that. Yeah, go on. Well, yeah, and I appreciate that. The one thing is that this isn't a one city role here. You don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to find a city that is going through change. You could do this in your own city
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah.
And that's what I implore people that are listening right now, that they can do the same. Yeah, it would be awesome if people could buy the service that we sell. We love our customers, but more so inspiration, and that you don't have to move to New York or Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
or San Francisco to be successful.
Yes.
That you could do it in your own backyard because of this world of this digital economy that we live in today's day and age.
Yeah. So that's great. So let's move over to. I see here on your LinkedIn profile that you're on the board of Waterfront Ventures, which is a VC company, correct, in Camden?
Yeah, it's an economic development
Yeah.
organization. So like that organization helps. That's actually where my co-founder started. He started that business. So I'm on the board as a liaison, just to help out and build relationships and community. But the goal of Waterfront Ventures is to bring 100 businesses into the city. And right now we're the only tech company in Camden, and we plan on bringing in 99 more versions of us, and we want to be the gold standard of what businesses do and how they operate, because if we need to live, we need to preach what we need to do what we preach.
Yes. All right. So where did the idea for Penji come from?
The idea from Penji came from a couple of things. So the idea originally came from when we were interviewed by the implementation came from an interview.
Okay.
But I'll speak to the original idea of where it came from. So we went on a trip to Vietnam. And my now co-founder and I were sitting. We both had different businesses, and we were sitting down at a coffee shop in a city called Phu Quoc. And it's kind of weird because my co-founder is a man, and we very much so both like the opposite sex. And I probably went on the most romantic islands in the world with my. I've probably done more romantic things with my co-founder than I have with my girlfriend and stuff like that. So we went to this place called Phu Quoc, and I mean, we've had coconut on the beach. We did massages on the beach.
Oh,
I mean,
my.
we watched the sunset. I mean, we pretty much did everything without saying I love you. So, but with that said, we were at a coffee shop, and we were just like, you know what, like, this isn't what we're doing right now. It's not enough, and what can we do more? And at the time, it was called something else, and he brought the idea up, and I actually told him to go F himself. Real talk. I said, like, we can't be doing this. Like we're already switching. Like, we can't. This can't be it. And after the original comments of just like F you and that initial anger, you started thinking about it some more, and it actually made sense. The way agencies are, like, our biggest problem as an agency was the design. Finding a trusted designer.
Yes.
Because we need to look good, right? You need to look good. Yeah. That's the biggest differentiator in business, is your design. If you don't look good, if you don't look the part, if you don't dress the way that you're supposed to, people aren't going to respect you. So that goes the same way with the digital aspect. So we knew design was an issue, and we knew that other agencies like us had the same issues. So we came up with the concept, and in the next couple of days or so, we not only signed up for our competitors, but we started reaching out and providing a survey. And we surveyed our existing audience of about, we have like close to a couple thousand friends between all of us. And I think we got about like 150 surveys, something around that line.
Yeah.
And we asked them, if we built this, would you buy it? And if we built this, what do you want? and they inevitably became our foundation of our existing customers.
Okay.
And then from there, it just turned into more and more and more and more. But the idea basically just came from two things: being asked the question, "What are you doing for your community?" and being asked and then experiencing the hardships of just being an agency.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I have a question. When I think of design, especially if you're designing for a company, you think about it's a one-time expense. If I'm going to brand my new company, I'm going to put the money to invest and do it once, and I'm done. I'm not going to probably brand again for a set period of time. Now, your business model is more of the SaaS version, which is a monthly payment in exchange for doing design work. So do you guys only work with like other agencies that don't have the capacity to do the design work, or what?
Yeah, so I'd say it's like at this moment. So here, let me just tell you how our thought process was. In the
Sure.
very beginning, we were almost like we would have put $1 million on the people that needed us the most were small businesses and startups.
Okay.
And from using and researching, and we found out that those were the customers that, like what you just said, that exact experience.
Mm-hmm.
They need it, and then they once they get it, they go.
Yes.
And that's not, I mean, yes, that's profitable because you get that burst of clients, but it's not, you have to find those customers over again.
Yes.
So what we found is that agencies because we were an agency ourselves, we developed a process that helps agencies out because we know what they need.
Okay.
So we can help both customers, and we can help both customers well. However, the customer that primarily uses us is the agency.
Mm-hmm.
We like working with them because we can speak their language. They know what to expect.
Yeah.
They know the timetables. They know when to receive things, and they're not necessarily nitpicky as like a small business would be or a startup would be. They have a level of expertise and quality that they must uphold, which we always do.
Mm-hmm.
But what we found is a lot of the startups and a lot of the small businesses, they're so into their own brand. Sorry about the noise.
No.
But they're so into their own brand that they keep asking questions and fine tuning and tweaking, and so it takes a while to deliver that experience for them because they just need so much.
Yes. Yes. And so, what about in terms of differentiation? So, how does Penji differentiate itself from, a platform like Upwork or 99 Designs, for example?
Yeah, so our competition uses primitive ways of communicating, and it uses primitive ways in order to obtain the service, the design itself. And what we specialize in and what we want to focus on primarily is that communication. So we don't want you to send emails anymore because emails can get lost in translation. They are cumbersome. They are annoying at times. And so that's number one. And number two, we want to be able to make it easier for everybody to be able to get the designs that they need. Mm-hmm. And I think the service that we provide, the software that we've created provides all of that.
Okay.
And so we make it easier because our SaaS, our software, our service, our platform, whatever you want to call it, allows you to communicate directly with your designer.
Okay.
So you don't need to email anybody. Okay. You can do it. You can do and chat with somebody directly inside of that platform. You can receive all of your designs. You can edit you can suggest edits directly in the software as well. Okay. So if you have a logo and maybe they spell your last name wrong, because I'm sure somebody has spelled your last name wrong. Oh yeah. They spell my last name wrong too. But hypothetically speaking, they spell our names wrong. Yeah. And you're like, hey man, you didn't put the G in there. Well, you can click on the design that we created for you, and you can tell us that we spelled it wrong. rather than having to send an email, rather than having to complain and call us up, you can just do it directly on the software itself, and it's very, very easy and simple to use. So I think in a nutshell, to recap, we fix communication, and we're an out-of-the-box solution. So you just plug and play. You sign up and you're ready to go.
Okay. So how did you guys start growing this business? Because it's a young startup, but you grew from 0 to 100 customers in a relatively short period of time. So what were some of the things you did to grow and scale quickly?
A couple things, and none of them are going to be sexy.
They never are.
They never are. You got that right. So I would say the biggest sales approach that we've used has been an unscalable process at first.
Okay.
And just kind of throwing everything at the fan and find out like what process makes the most sense.
Okay.
That was the first thing, and that was great, and it also screwed us at the same time, because once we actually hit a number where we needed to start scaling, it was a little bit harder to scale because we didn't necessarily have all the ducks in a row. So some of the things that we did was the obvious stuff, content marketing. We did a lot of advertisings and cold email.
Okay.
But the one thing above everything else is that we were consistent about it. So even though we weren't necessarily strong in any of the areas, we made sure that every single day we came into our jobs that we did some form of sales. So at the time, we were about like 12 people deep. Now we're 23 people. And so for us being a small group, we had to make sure, and they're all in our office too, so we had to make sure that everyone was on the same page. Some of the people that we work that are team members of ours, they've been with us since from the agency and up until now. So they had that, well, are we an agency or are we a SaaS? Because they're two completely different styles of business.
That's true.
So what we did, and this is pretty controversial, to get everybody realigned with the new vision and the new direction of the company, we fired every single one of our employees, and then we rehired them the same exact second, the same day, under the new brand.
Okay.
And we kind of look at it from the standpoint of like shedding our own skin.
Okay.
So we made it dramatic, by firing, and we made it dramatic by hiring, because we want them to feel and want them to know that are no longer associated with that crap company before. Yeah. What you're associated with is an organization that has that can stand the test of time, and that actually stands for something more than just a service. So once we were able to do that, then we had to kind of just like re-educate ourselves, more importantly, and then also translate that education to our team by making them all do some form of task that moved the company forward in terms of sales. So even if they were a designer, even if they were a customer service, or they're in SEO or social media, every single person to this day has some form of sales that they have to hit.
Okay.
Whether that's emailing, prospecting, content, something. Everything revolves around sales within our company.
And I love that you make sales distributed in terms of it doesn't belong to the sales team. It belongs to everybody, because if we're all not putting in our weight to sell our services, then we're all not going to eat,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think sales can be, if your team is currently afraid of the word sales, I look at it from a couple of things. Number one, they don't understand your company well enough. And you can easily fix that by educating them about how you're helping people, and what your service, how your service helps the end user. Because if they understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, then it's not sales anymore, and it's just conversation.
Okay.
So it was. I mean, still to this day, I would say it's not perfect, but we're getting there.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it sounds like it's the right track to go because a lot of people think about sales. When I think about sales, I think about somebody just trying to come and try and like seduce me or cajole me to get in my business. Whereas, if you make every day in life, we're all selling something, whether you're talking to your girlfriend or you're talking to your parents, it has to do with sales. Sales is basically trying to convince someone to do something you want them to do for you, whether it's to come along with you on a trip or to buy something for you. You have to think about it as being in a conversation. And the more natural you can make that conversation, the easier it is to get that person to yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's a little bit different from a service business to do that than it was for an agency versus a SaaS business, because now every time we jump on the phone, we're losing money.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, let's be real, $349 a month.
Yeah.
Right. The minute you jump on a call, let's just say an average hourly rate for an agency is $85 an hour. Right. So you get on 4 phone calls and you're pretty much almost at your limit.
Yes.
And
you haven't started work.
You haven't even started work. So now that we're a SaaS, we have to make sure that every form of communication is streamlined and every process is tight and lean.
So how did you guys come up with the streamlining of your processes and your systems to build the business more effectively? Because I know as a SaaS business, that's kind of like the number one thing a lot of people get wrong, in that they don't think about processes and systems early on up until they start to have problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the hardest things that we found was finding the right software.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of people feel as if that they need software in order to be successful. And
when you say software, what do you mean? Like Slack?
Yeah, like a lot of people won't move until they necessarily have the right fit.
Okay.
And it's like, I mean, I can't start the affiliate process because I don't have the email drip campaign. I can't sell this service because I don't have the processes set up, or I can't cold email people because I don't know what to do. I don't know how to track it. So what we did first was we kind of said, like, let's just get it done. Stop holding ourselves back and let's just do it. But then I'd say probably up until even now, now we're more data and analytics company now, because what we realized just from trial and error is that you can't make business decisions unless it's backed off of data. And if you're not tracking this, if you're not categorizing everything, and you're not moving with purpose, you can't make a smart decision. Because and one of our advisors actually told us this, and I implore people to ask themselves the same question. If I were to give you $1, where would you put it in your business? And honestly, I got asked that question, and I was like, I don't have to know, man. Like, I have no idea. And that's a problem, because as one of the co-founders and the driving forces of one of the driving forces of the company, you need to know where to put your dollar. Yes. Is it investing in another team member, like hiring? Is it putting that extra dollar in advertising? What is going to move the needle to get your company to where you want it to be? For us, we wanted to, hopefully one day we could sell. But right now, the only thing that we care about is getting to 1,000 customers, getting to 2,000 customers, 5,000, 10,000 customers. So like, we have very large goals for our company and for ourselves. And I think you just need to be able to ask yourself what it is that you want to be. And if you're not as weird and crazy as we are, that's fine. Maybe you just want to be local. Maybe you just want to be able to own your own territory and domain. That's cool, but you have to have those healthy conversations with yourself as to what you want and what do you expect out of your life.
Love it, love it. All right, and as we start to transition and wind down the show, I have like one or two personal questions for you. So my first question is this, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you, like the rest of us, have faced challenges and failures in the past. So could you talk a little bit about one of the biggest failures you've experienced and how you overcame it and what you learned from it?
Sure. The the biggest fear I've had was myself. I was afraid of myself, and that there comes a time where me personally, we all have egos,
Yeah.
and some of them are much stronger than others, and some of our egos can easily be scratched and can tarnish relationships. And what I found was I was going down a path that wasn't good for myself and for the people around me. I was at one point a very egotistical individual. I still think, I mean, I have to have an ego because you're an entrepreneur, but the ego got in the way of any type of potential growth in the company and any growth within myself. And it came a lot of really interesting conversations that we've had with team members and executives within the organization to make me aware of just things that are happening. And what can you do to overcome those things? And the first and foremost was, number one, I was a bad leader. And I acknowledge that, and I'm still not the best leader, but being that this is quote unquote one of my only jobs I've ever had, you kind of learn on the go, and you learn through other people, and sometimes it's the expense of employees, and so what can you do to make yourself a better human being? And it's providing that balance. I don't think I had enough balance in my life. One, and I always felt as if that at one point in time that I was bigger than the company. And at the end of the day, the things that I learned is that you are not bigger than the company. The company will always be bigger than you, and you are 100% replaceable. Let's look at Uber, for example. The guy who created Uber is no longer the CEO. He's just a co-founder. He's living on the sidelines because of just stupid things that he did professionally. You can look at the what's happening in Google right now, and there was the recent today's news about Theranos. The CEO did something stupid, and they're now gone. Now, I've never said it. I'm not going to say here I've never done anything stupid, but I can say that it puts me into perspective and puts my life into check that I need to make sure that I'm constantly being a positive resource to every single person that is in our company and to the people I interact with. And I always have to make sure that I'm on stage 100% of the time. Because if I don't live that lifestyle where everybody is looking at me and I say something that may be a joke, or maybe I whatever it may be, I need to just say to myself and hold every single person in the company that we're always on stage as leaders, and we need to be on our A game from the minute that we walk into the door to the minute that we the minute that we go home and go back to our houses or apartments.
I love that, being present and being upfront about leadership. I like that. And my next question is, looking back on the journey, I know you just started, your career thus far, but looking back, do you think there are things maybe at the beginning when you were starting out, or even while you were working with other companies, that you could have done better to either improve your skill set as an entrepreneur or to make you better prepared for entrepreneurship going forward?
And this is like me looking at it at a younger age.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Probably read more.
Okay.
And I say read more in two ways. I think early on in my career, I read everything that the internet told me to read.
Okay.
So if it popped up on my newsfeed, I read it. Or if somebody sent me an article, I read it. Or if one of my favorite entrepreneurs created a piece of content, I watched it. And that has been, I'd say, one of the biggest regrets of my life is spending that time listening and reading the bullcrap that other people have mentioned. It's relatively easy to get featured in these large publications, and there's no disrespect at all to these publications, but a lot of these people aren't vetted, and they're not trusted, and they're not proven. They're just giving their expertise because they got an opportunity. But the things that stands the test of time and can never be changed are books. And you can go to the store and get a book on Barnes & Noble. I'd recommend reading a book that is published by a trusted publisher, because they had some type of agreement and they've had some type of contract that holds them to that standard. And so we should be reading more books than we should be reading articles. So that would be my biggest like learning experience. And the one thing that I wish I did sooner was read more books rather than articles.
That's very interesting you said that, because I think for me, I kind of got into reading articles a little later, because growing up in Nigeria, I always had access to a library. When I came to college in the US, I practically lived in the library with interlibrary loans, getting books from other colleges around the US, and just reading. In fact, I think at one point before I left the US, I had up to 400 books in my library at home in my apartment. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Unfortunately, I couldn't take them all, but so that advice is so crucial, because I think I learned a lot about history, about business, about how people think in general, because in as much as we want to be better entrepreneurs, you can even learn a lot about business and life by reading, let's say, a historical book on someone that started a cooking, being a cook, or how to make a cookbook or something like that.
Or leadership from like a military officer or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. There are so many lessons that are applicable, because these are timeless principles that is just based on that person's frame at that time. That person happened to be in the military, and they learn those leadership principles. But that doesn't mean those principles, if you plug them into a business, if you plug them into academia, if you plug them into non-profits, they won't work. They will always work because they are tried and tested principles.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
All right. So my last question for you for today. I know we've run a little longer, but I've enjoyed having you on. So one thing I want to ask you is, for someone sitting listening to the podcast, and they too are kind of struggling with their corporate job right now, and they want to start a business, or they want to at least test the waters, maybe with a side hustle or something. What would you advise the person listening to the show today that is exploring entrepreneurship but is not yet committed to go 100% into entrepreneurship, to start doing to prepare themselves?
I'd say find somebody else that you want to inevitably become or be like that particular individual, and find a way to work for them for free, work for them on the side, or find a way to be around that particular individual or that type of company. So if it's a company, try and find a way to work for the company for free. If it's a person, try to hang out with that person and be around that person, become that person's friend. Because I think that's the one thing that I wish that one of the things that I wish that I could have done was, I wish I would have been able to experience more and be able to talk to more people, and instead of kind of just like being on my own for most of it and figuring it out. I mean, I don't regret any of the things I've done, because it got me to this position right now, but I think I could have I could have failed less and experienced more from hearing the stories of other people, and figuring out what they were able to do first. And I'd say that is probably the most important thing. If you don't have it figured out just yet, that's totally fine. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But if you're really serious about it, you'd already be doing it now. So yeah, just go out there, reach out to somebody, put yourself in awkward situations, because you never know what's gonna turn out of it. I could say everything great in my entire life has come from a situation where I didn't expect it to turn out the way that I thought it would. Whether that's going to an event, whether that's meeting a particular individual. I've always went into that particular task as like, yeah, this is gonna be cheesy. This is gonna, like, I don't need to go to this. Like, it's fine. And then I go to it, and then I'm like, holy crap! This is what happened. It's like I did this today. Like, I talked to this person. And I'll give you an example too. Never in a million years, I have a podcast just like you do, and never in a million years I would have thought that I would have been able to get the amount of people that would want to talk about themselves on my podcast.
Yeah.
And number two, the amount of talent that have been able to be on my podcast. I just recently interviewed 5 of the top entrepreneurs, thinkers, investors in the world. And that was all because I just put myself out there and I tweeted them. And I didn't expect anything of it. And a lot of people will be like, yeah, I tweet all the time.
Yeah.
Just use it to your advantage, man. Stop talking about yourself and just engage yourself in conversations.
They just waste their tweets when they can actually leverage them for more powerful stuff. Yeah, so that's good that you mentioned the podcast. So tell us a little bit more about the Blind Entrepreneur Show and what you talk about and what you're doing with that project.
Well, first and foremost, I'd love that. We need to get you on the show.
Oh, thanks.
That would be awesome. And then two, it came from, and maybe you can speak to this too, but I started the podcast because I was lonely, and I wanted to learn more from people.
Yeah.
And I knew that there are people that are in this world that experience things more so than I did. Very similar to reading a history book. I ask questions on my podcast that help me out personally.
Yes.
Because I know it's going to help somebody else.
Yes.
So if you're going through issues of leadership, ask leadership questions. If you're going through, nowadays what I do is I ask. When I first started the podcast, I was like, you know what? Let's talk about their life, and that was cool, and that worked out well. But now all I talk about is how they grew the company.
Yes.
And I ask about what did they do to get their first 100 customers? Because if I can find out how they did it, I might be able to apply it to my own business too.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're about 150 plus episodes in. I know for me too, like you said, you started out in loneliness. For me, kind of the same thing, but I also started mine because I wanted to learn more about how to build a business from people building a business in Africa specifically at the time. And then I was just like, I was not engaged in my work when I was working in management consulting, and I needed something to just engage me and something to make me creative, because I felt I was just going to work to crunch Excel, come back home exhausted, and I wasn't like really firing my brain cells. So I'd schedule my podcast interviews, I remember clearly, at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., because Africa was 5 hours ahead, and that's the only time most people could talk to me. And I'd do that. After that, take like a 30-minute nap, go take a shower, hop on the train to New York to go to work, and I'd feel energized all day. Mind you, I've been up since 3 a.m., and I only got to bed at like 10 or so. And I was so energized compared to when I'd sleep the full 8 hours and then get to work. So I was like, there's really some value to, having an in-depth conversation with somebody somewhere across the globe, getting advice, life experiences, sharing personal adventures and stories, and just making meaningful connections. And that's what I continue to do it till today,
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about that grind, man. And I'm grateful for people like yourself that are doing some cool things on podcasts, and I'm appreciative of this time that we had together to share our stories.
Yeah, it's my pleasure having you, man. I really enjoyed the conversation, and of course, we're definitely going to stay in touch and keep connecting and sharing stories. But before I let you go, I came up with a Nigerian name for you.
Oh, let's do it.
So I'm going to give it to you. So I'm sure you know Nigeria, the big tribes are Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba. And I fall under the Igbo tribe, but I don't know many Igbo names because I've not spent time there. But a lot of my friends are Yoruba, and so I know the names and the culture well. And so one of the names that stuck out in my mind was based on your story and our conversation thus far is Oladele. So it's Oladele. And what it translates to, it means a person of success.
I like that.
So the short form is Dele, Dele, but Oladele is a person of success, which I think you are.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So it's Oladele or Dele. Okay.
Yes.
Dele. Beautiful. Hey, I appreciate that, man, and thank you so much.
Oh, no problem, buddy.
And I'm gonna do my research, and I'm gonna find out exactly what the origins are and the meaning behind. I'm gonna do probably more research than you expect. So I appreciate that, and thank you for everything. It means a lot.
No problem, man. My pleasure.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com.